Don't get pepper sprayed over Novak Djokovic. He won't even take a vaccine for you. Megan McPeak, first show of 2022. Start us off with your hottest New Year's take.
Okay, I have two. I came prepared. So
All right.
First one, by the time this airs, it's going to be over with. But I don't know anybody who lives in Alabama, so I'm going to roll with the Dogs. They're going to be the Natty Champs. That's my first
hot take. It's a blazing hot take. We'll see.
Right?
We'll see if real life bears out what Mextradamus is predicting. Take two. Go ahead.
Take two. The Los Angeles Lakers, as it stands right now, they are in the 7th place, which they would be in the play-in situation. I have them remaining in the play-in situation, and I have the King getting knocked out in the play-in tournament. If the roster remains as it is, if they don't make any moves, that's my caveat. If they keep this roster the same, the King gets eliminated in the play-in tournament.
Roster remains as it is, meaning old.
And
yes. I like the Lakers as currently constituted. I think they probably get the same ads on Instagram that I get. All the hey, do you want to be an ageless male? What about your tea? Don't you want more energy? Like, this is probably what the Lakers need. They should strike some type of brand partnership with the supplement makers for middle-aged males. So listen, I'll buy. If I was a betting man, I'd bet on that too. If I was a stock market,
they don't make any moves. I don't have them going further in the playoffs than the play-in tournament.
They could make moves, but they might just get more old guys, right? They're like, hey, does Joe Johnson want to finish the season? Has he played out all his 10 days? Bring him in over here. I would buy stock in that one too, Megan. Dave Zyron, start us off 2022 with a hot take.
Okay, here's your hot take. Aaron Rodgers is going to be your NFL MVP. The Green Bay Packers are the overwhelming favorites to make it to the Super Bowl out of the NFC. And there is not a hog's chance in flight that the Green Bay Packers are going to make the Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers passed his prologue. He's been playing 17 years. They've been to one Super Bowl. It's not like he's been to a bunch and has gotten knocked out. That team has been to one Super Bowl in 17 years. That team will not play for him when the going gets tough. Passed his prologue. Aaron Rodgers, another face plant after a year of face plants from Aaron.
Now, they won't play for him, or is it that, like what I've heard from other people, and it makes a lot of sense, is that they are built to win regular season games because they like to throw the ball. But once they get, especially home games in the playoffs, and the weather gets ugly and they got to be able to run the ball, they can't do it as well as they need to in the snow.
I don't know. Over 17 years, I've seen Aaron Rodgers choke in all kinds of climates. So I guess this will be another year we can find out. We'll see where the evidence falls.
Perfect. All right. So I don't have hot takes, but I have a couple rests in peace that we're going to relate to the sports world. First, obviously, Sidney Poitier passed away over the weekend at, I want to say 94 years old. And Dave, fact check me on this, but I think he was the first Black actor to win Best Actor Oscars. And then nobody until Denzel. And it was about 38 years in between. All of that. People want to act. Go ahead.
Yep, Best Actor 1963, Lilies of the Field, and you don't see another Black man win that award until Denzel for Training Day,
right?
37 years later.
Yeah, and Denzel wins that Oscar for the one character when he plays in his career that's like an unrepentant, unredeemed jerk, which says something else about like what the royal we value.
Halle Berry was also the winner that night too.
Was that
It was all the same night, and it was the same night that they honored Sidney Poitier.
Okay, well,
there's a picture of the three of them, and I remember Denzel. There was a clip that went viral. Denzel's speech, he actually like made a joke about like, I've been chasing you my entire life, and they're gonna honor you the same night I win too.
40 years I've been chasing Sidney. They finally give it to me. What they do? They give it to him the same night. I'll always be chasing you, Sidney. I'll always be following in your footsteps. There's nothing I would rather do, sir. Nothing I would rather do. God bless you.
Well, listen, for the sticks of sport, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, just to point out, and over the next couple of years, you had Jamie Foxx, Forrest Whitaker win Oscars. But I'm talking like the big Best Actor categories. But then since then, it's been another insane dry spell where people from Chadwick Boseman to Tessa Thompson have been utterly ignored by the Academy. So when people say Oscars so white, that's not just a hashtag.
No.
That's a statement of historical reality.
Right. And so for the stick to sports people, because I'm sure there's people out there saying, what does this have to do with sports? I'll give you this. I'm not even a big movie guy, but I have seen Uptown Saturday Night, which stars Sidney Poitier alongside someone who we don't mention anymore unless we have to, Bill Cosby, because we had to because they're in the movie. But if I remember correctly, that movie climaxes with a softball game. And so there you go, stick to sports. And the second RIP is to James Mtume, who was all-star percussionist, composer, music producer, worked with everyone from like Miles Davis to indirectly Biggie Smalls, because he's the guy, his band did Juicy Fruit, which Biggie sampled for Juicy, which is where probably most of you know that, or some of y'all probably don't even know it was a sample. And what does that have to do with sports? Well, James Mtume co-wrote Soul Sister, which was Bilal Oliver's first single. And that single first showed up on the Love and Basketball soundtrack. So there you go. It's stuck to sports. Rest in peace to James Mtume. Like, if you are really into sleazy slow jams like I am, and like Chuba Hubbard, the guy we reference a lot, Carolina Panthers running back, if you look at his Instagram, he is a 23-year-old man. Sorry, he is a 45-year-old man trapped in a 23-year-old's athletic body based on what he listens to. If you check his Instagram, a lot of old sleazy slow jams. So he might know some of James Mtume's catalog. But if we were to rename this podcast, we could call it, because it's me, Megan, and Dave, you, me, and he, for the hardcore Mtume fans. But while we're here with the panel, Megan McPeak, introduce yourself to the people.
I'm Megan McPeak, people.
All right, she is play-by-play voice of the Washington Mystics and the Capital City Go-Go, occasional play-by-play voice of the, occasional radio play-by-play voice of the Wizards. Also in Washington, D.C., we have sports editor of The Nation, author of 11 books, most recently, The Kaepernick Effect. Dave Zirin, how we doing?
I just wanted to say that it's great to be here. My name is Dave. I like to write. You don't know? Better ask somebody.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, if you don't know, now you know.
Nah.
Biggie Mtume.
I know.
Full circle. But all right, we got a lot to get to this week. Oh yeah, and if you're new here, if you're a veteran here, a veteran member of the audience, please remember to like the post, subscribe to CBC Sports YouTube channel, leave us a comment. Even if you want to leave us a nasty comment, we don't care, because the only thing that matters is what, Megan?
That we feed the algorithm, Morgan. It does not change just because the year changes.
Exactly. The algorithm has a bottomless appetite, much like I do after my early morning workouts. Like, it's just ready to grub all the time. Okay, so we got a lot to get to this week, as when I say that every week because it's always true. We're talking media mergers. We are talking COVID's ongoing effect on the sports landscape, and we are talking the latest with Novak Djokovic. The latest with Novak Djokovic is that he won a bit of a court battle this morning to, and we record on Monday morning, so all this stuff might change by the time we hit the internet, but he's not getting deported. He's not getting the boot from Australia like Bart Simpson almost did. He has won this appeal. And so now, all of this is just as unclear as it always was. The only thing that's clear is Novak Djokovic is not vaccinated and does not want to get vaccinated, and that you still technically aren't allowed into Australia if you haven't had a vaccine. Megan McPeak, to what extent is Novak Djokovic benefiting from the fact that he's Novak Djokovic? Like, if this is me or you trying to get into Australia with no vaccine, how well would that go?
Well, we would not have gotten on the flight, first of all. But then again, he probably took a private plane, so there's a whole thing there. Yeah, no, we wouldn't have gotten into the country. We wouldn't have gotten past border control. It just would have been a completely different situation. And we would not have gotten out of the immigration detention center like he did earlier this morning when we prepared for taping. But like, it's such an interesting situation because there's like, on one side, Tennis Australia is like, no, we gave him an exemption. On the other side, the government's like, well, that doesn't that's not a governmental situation. So I'm not sure
Yes.
how you can give someone an exemption without us knowing or us approving it. And then there's the even more confusing thing that is saying, okay, when he had COVID, it was past the date of applying for the exemption. So it's very confusing. And I'm not really sure which leg of the tentacle of the octopus to believe in this situation, because I don't think there's 8. I think there's like 65 tentacles at this point.
Well, this is the thing, because the idea, the revelation that he tested positive for COVID came later instead of sooner. Now, far be it for me to dispense free PR advice to Novak Djokovic. Like, these folks really need to have me on retainer. What I'm saying is, if you're going to brag about your medical exemption to get into Australia and play in the Australian Open, you do that after you're already there, not before you get on a long flight to Australia. It's probably, 12 hours long, however long it takes to get to Australia, but long enough to give people time to figure out that they don't like the fact that you're rubbing this thing in their faces when Australians have been, going through vaccine mandates, mandatory testing, quarantine when they leave the country, all of this stuff. And so the smarter play would have been to assure all this stuff instead of assuming it, then get to the country and say, oh yeah, I had a medical exemption. Or if you really did test positive and if your positive test is a thing that allows you to circumvent the quarantine, then just be upfront about that instead of acting, the way Aaron Rodgers did. Like, you're just smarter than everyone. I have this secret answer. What I have is a medical exemption. I guess so. Well, get in line with the other 8,000 people and, exempt yourself right to the hotel. Dave Zirin, go ahead, but where does this rank on like the Antonio Brown, Aaron Rodgers scale of half-ass to no-ass COVID vaccine mandate illusion?
I mean, Novak Djokovic is like the unholy hybrid of Aaron Rodgers and Antonio Brown. He's got all of the arrogance and obnoxious entitlement of Aaron Rodgers, while at the same time, he may be playing very fishy with his positive and negative tests and his results like Antonio Brown. So he's all of the arrogance and all of the sleaziness, all of the entitlement that we've seen in the NFL, except it's also topped with a lovely whipped cream of Serbian nationalism on top of that. Because no 2 words bring your heart more joy than Serbian and nationalism, because we've never had problems with that in human history. But what you have outside in Australia are now actually violent battles between Serbian Australian protesters, people in Australia of Serbian descent, at least they're waving flags and whatnot, and the police. So this is like the Aaron Rodgers situation on steroids. I mean, this is like this idea of building a cult of personality around an athlete because people want to defend his entitlement and his libertarian right to not get a vaccine precisely because they feel empowered through his stubbornness in the face of Australia's mandates. And, there's something about the entire situation that's very repugnant in that regard. And what you'd like to see, if I was giving Novak Djokovic advice, I would say a couple of things. I would say, first of all, get the jab, just do it and stop with this several year soap opera that you've subjected people to. Hey. Second thing is, if you do test positive, don't hang out with children the same day. And the last thing is, stay away from a reporter named Ben Rothenberg, who has decided to be the Javert to Novak Djokovic's Jean Valjean, and will follow him till the ends of the earth until he exposes Djokovic for who he is, although it seems like Novak Djokovic is doing a great, wonderful job of that all on his own.
Yeah. Certain things might be worth rioting over. And I don't care how much you like tennis or how much you like Serbia. I'm not sure Novak Djokovic is one of them. Like, don't go to jail over Novak Djokovic, because he would not go to jail for you. Don't get pepper sprayed over Novak Djokovic. He won't even take a vaccine for you. Don't take a billy club upside the head for Novak Djokovic. Guys, don't do it. Dave, go ahead.
Just really quickly, I don't feel like they're even necessarily good guys in this story, because one of the things that it has exposed, at least for an audience, is that this hotel where Djokovic has been staying for days, has been basically interned for days. I mean, there are migrants who've been staying in these hotels for years in Australia. I mean, their policy for the last several years, their policies are incredibly racist. And it's interesting, like hearing about the protests outside the hotel. They're actually kind of separate protests. There was the Serbian nationalist one, and then there was the Australian anti-racist campaigners one, who were trying to raise awareness about the plight of migrants through Djokovic, which is another thing I would not have advised if I was in the planning meeting.
No, because Djokovic does not care about the migrants. Like is Djokovic, like even from a sports standpoint, like Djokovic is not there saying, hey, all these people you have penned up in these hotels, the next Thon Maker might be in here. He might boost your country's basketball fortune. He doesn't care about that, guys. He doesn't care about much besides Novak Djokovic. And the sooner people figure that out, like the better we will all be. Meantime, Vanessa James and Eric Radford, who are two of the best figure skaters in the world, they're a pair. They pulled out of Canadian championships over the weekend because each of them had tested positive for COVID in December, and they lost a bunch of training and they just weren't able to perform the way they wanted to at national championships. But when Skating Canada announced the Olympic team that's headed to Beijing next month, guess who was on the team? James and Radford, which, and I'm not that deep into figure skating. My wife is. She watches the trials. I slept through them with the baby on the couch, but that's a big deal. Megan McPeak, if you were making the team, and maybe you should make the team next time, are James and Radford, who pulled out of, not trials, national championships, are they on your Olympic team?
I think it's a tough situation because how can you say that you can put yourself in a position to be ready for the Olympics if you weren't in a position to be ready for nationals? I feel like you should have to perform at nationals to be part of the national team going to the Olympics. And I don't think it's fair to the other pairs who weren't named to the team because they've taken a spot from them and did perform at nationals. So it's a tough situation to be in. It's kind of reminiscent of, on the US side, the speed skating, and one skater deciding that she's going to give her spot to the other because the other tripped and fell and didn't qualify. So I think it's a tough situation. And I think, in my opinion, if I can't perform at nationals, I shouldn't be able to perform at the Olympics. And I should remove myself from the team and allow a pair that performed at nationals and actually competed and tried to make the team, give them that spot. But again, it's easier for me to say that sitting here than being in that actual situation. But it's a no-win situation for them. If they go, people will, say that they shouldn't be going because they didn't compete. If they don't go, they don't get a chance at the Olympics, and maybe they don't qualify for the next one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's as little as I follow figure skating, the times I'm made aware of it, it does amaze me how much this sport is like boxing, like as different as the two sports are in terms of like their substance. They both are highly political, highly subjective, and the person, you could sit there and watch a competition and know who won, only to find out the judges thought something different. And in this case, what's built into the Olympic qualification process are all kinds of loopholes. So the national championships are the de facto trials unless something unexpected happens, and then you can factor in overall performance, et cetera, which seems to be what happened with this week. Now, I do not have a dog in any figure skating fight, and so what it seems to be is that like these two are the best overall, and they happen not to have done well here because they caught COVID and couldn't train. And I guess the theory is, between now and Beijing, they'll have 3 straight weeks to get it all together, but we'll see. But Dave Zirin, like, what kind of signals are we sending, again, from the sports world to the rest of society about how to deal with COVID?
I've really wrestled over this particular case. And what I come back to is that if the sports world was serious about wrestling with COVID, then the Beijing Olympics wouldn't be happening in the first place. Like, this decision should have been made for the Canadian Olympic officials and the figure skating officials, just by the fact that we're not going to do these Olympics in the first place. But then there's this part of me that thinks like, okay, if we're just going on a straight toboggan ride to hell with all of this, and saying, because, to me, it's connected to this whole idea of saying, oh, well, now you only need 5 days and you can go back to work. It's like all these arbitrary new rules, which are basically just geared around keeping the trains running on time and have nothing to do with public health. As long as we're going to live that life, then all the rules are out the window. This is just where I've landed on. And if the Canadian figure skating officials want this particular pair to be over there in Beijing, then so be it. And if anybody says, hey, that's not fair, that's an asterisk, that's not something that should be taking place, I would respond, well, none of this should be taking place.
Right.
And if all this is now bells and whistles and bread and circuses, then put the people out there and let's see what happens and let's forget about life for a while, because the current setup is already so twisted that I don't see how you make a straight line out of this.
Yeah, and the big difference, Dave, between Tokyo and Beijing, right, is that Tokyo happened before Omicron. Tokyo also happened at a time when we, like as a society in North America and beyond, were taking this seriously and didn't want people with COVID mixing with people who didn't have COVID, because we didn't want outbreaks, and we thought we could contain outbreaks and cared about containing outbreaks. The difference here being, this seems like, to me, a recipe for a lot of long quarantines post games and a lot of headaches, right? Because you have Omicron, and Omicron is very shifty. Omicron gets around tests and it pops up and it runs through your whole roster like it did, and it runs through your whole tournament like it did at the World Junior Hockey Championship. And so now, unlike Tokyo, we have Omicron that is going to come to Beijing with at least one athlete, and it's going to leave Beijing with a bunch of athletes, except that you get 10 people test positive at Beijing. That's 10 people that have to stay in China like a minimum 3 weeks after the games. And so, like, what is this going to look like for the second half of these seasons, your bobsled season, figure skating season, whatever it is? These men and women compete through February into March, into, early spring. But you run, it's a coin toss now as to whether or not, like, your biggest stars are going to get through the Olympics without a positive test. And if they test positive at the Olympics, you can, cross out the whole next month of their lives, because they're just going to be in the hotel. Megan McPeak.
The other thing too, Morgan, keep in mind, like, the issue with this situation, to Dave's point is, and to what you were just saying, is, let's say, because we know it's going to happen, there's going to be an athlete from some country that tests positive. As you mentioned, they have to quarantine for up to 3 weeks because that's been the policy there. The issue that a lot of people seem to forget, or they either forget or they choose to not even acknowledge, is you can continue to test positive even after you're no longer infectious for weeks. So you're no longer infectious. You've quarantined for 3 weeks. Let's say you continue to test positive, you could potentially be stuck in Beijing for 2 months, 3 months, who knows? Because the most minimal amount of virus in your system can be detected by these tests, and it will keep you in quarantine. And it's a crappy situation.
Yeah, you're not in Beijing for 3 weeks as a tourist, right? You're there.
No, you're stuck in a hotel room. I've been there. It sucks. Not Beijing. I've been stuck in a hotel room for 2 weeks. It is a disaster. Yeah, well, this is today's point. What we're asking for. This is what we've decided we wanted when we, around the world, lower the standards regarding how long you should take yourself out of action, sports or like a real life job, before you go back in. Are you testing negative? It doesn't matter. Are you you're not asymptomatic, but your symptoms are abating? Cool. Go back to work. I'm sure nothing bad can happen. Omicron is milder, right? I don't know, but we will see. And I don't know. Fingers crossed. If I had the dexterity on my feet, I'd cross my toes too, but I don't have a great deal of optimism. Last week, the New York Times bought The Athletic, the sports website, The Athletic, for $550 million, which is a lot of money.
which is a lot of money, but it's actually less than the people who founded The Athletic thought they were going to get. They thought they were going to get closer to $750,000 for this site. Now, full disclosure, I do a lot of freelance work for the New York Times. I have not written for The Athletic, but I did a presentation for them. So both these companies have put money in my pocket and allowed me to have these lavish surroundings. Like, look at this iPhone. Thanks, New York Times. Thanks, Athletic. Thanks, CBC. But anyway, here's the thing, though.
You're welcome.
Is that right?
As a subscriber.
From here we go. So I'll ask you, Megan, because from the beginning, The Athletic, they made plain when they were profiled in the New York Times, and one of their founders said, our goal is just to bleed every local sports department in the country, and I guess the continent, because The Athletic is in Canada too, bleed them all till they just run out of talent. And when they collapse, we'll just come clean up the mess. But what has happened is sort of the opposite, is that a newspaper has bought The Athletic. Like, Megan McPeak, what does this transaction say to you about where sports journalism is headed?
And it's hard to really say, because it only happened like Thursday or Friday, I believe, is when I read the article on it. And it wasn't really informative as to what that meant for the writers for The Athletic, what it meant for subscribers. What I took away from it, and full disclosure, like you, Morgan, I'm a subscriber to The Athletic because of my job. I need to know what's going on, and just focusing on one entity for sports doesn't really help. And they do a lot of deep dives into some topics when it comes to sports as well too. So it didn't really tell subscribers like, oh, you're going to roll over, you're going to stay at this subscription, you don't have to subscribe to the New York Times as well. It's still something that I think they're working out and figuring out. I know in the article I read, it mentioned that they might offer a full New York Times package, that you get the New York Times and The Athletic. What does that mean for subscribers at this point? We're still trying to figure that out. What it means for writers of The Athletic, we don't know. I have a lot of colleagues that write for The Athletic, and trying to figure out what that means for them. It's tough, because now you're wondering, okay, am I out of a job? Do I now do I work for The Athletic continuing? Am I now an employee of the New York Times? What does this mean for me and my job? Like, a lot of people, I'm wondering what they feel right now. And it's confusing, because it could be great for The Athletic being under the platform of the New York Times. You get eyeballs on your articles that your writers are writing that you might not have gotten because you were just The Athletic. Now you're tied into the New York Times. But it could also be bad if the New York Times decides, we don't need all of these writers. We no longer want to continue the model that The Athletic was going with, having one, dedicated writer per sports team. That's what they were trying to do, at least with NBA coverage they were doing. So it's still so new that I honestly don't know what this means for sports journalism, because we don't know what they're going to do as the New York Times with this new acquisition. And if I'm a writer for The Athletic, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, a couple of things we know about The Athletic is one, some years they make money. They don't always make money, because they spend a lot of money hiring people. They spend a lot of money on talent. But we also know that they have benefited from successive rounds of venture capital. Like, there's always these people just saying, here, Athletic, here's 8 figures. Here, Athletic, here's 7 more figures. Take the money. Go ahead.
Sorry, Morgan, to just add to what you're saying. Let's also keep in the caveat that The Athletic doesn't do any advertising. They go strictly off of subscribers. So that's where their revenue comes in.
Yeah, well, exactly. So what we haven't seen is whether that model is profitable in the long term, or profitable at the prices The Athletic is selling itself for right now. But what has happened is, the founders and the venture capitalists, it's not for them to find out anymore. It's for the New York Times to find out what price plus what reach plus the possibility of advertising or partnerships or whatever makes this thing profitable. Because that's something we still don't know. Like, can a huge sports media outlet run strictly on subscriber dollars? That's what we're trying to find out. And this is what the people writing the checks at the New York Times are about to find out. Dave Zirin, what were you going to say?
Man, I have a friend of mine who writes for The Athletic, not going to say his name. When he heard about this merger, he was all like, OMG, I can't believe this. I'm 29 and now I work for the New York Times. And I was like, dude, that's like being excited that you work for SeaWorld because they got you swimming with the sharks. I mean, I'm much more in the Megan camp about this. I'd be very concerned if I was an athletic writer right now, because why did this buy happen? $550 million in cash, as the New York Times was very pointed about saying. It's happening because the New York Times promised its stockholders that they were going to have 10 million subscribers, and they currently only have 8.2, and the Athletic brings in 1.3. So from the New York Times perspective, what is the Athletic? The Athletic is a rounding error for a stock dividend. That doesn't sound like the kind of commitment that the people of the Athletic, who I've seen in action, have put towards their product. I mean, the people I know who work for the Athletic, they put out some of the best sports journalism in the country. And I don't see any evidence that the New York Times prizes that part of the deal as much as they prize the possible profit-making part of the deal for their stockholders. And that would make me very concerned about issues like layoffs, profitability, as they like to call it, trimming the fat, which is usually just trimming the effectiveness of the operation. So we're going to have to see what happens. We really do not know. But it's one of the things where I would not be going in like pumping my fist right now if I was with the Athletic. I'd be going in much more like, okay, I'm concerned about this. Prove me wrong.
Yeah, well, as New York Times sports business writer Kevin Draper was tweeting over the weekend, like this, and he does have a dog in the fight because he works for the Times. But at the same time, this is a little bit different from a hedge fund buying your media outfit, right? So like if Mitt Romney comes up and says, hey, we're going to buy your newspaper, you know what, just quit, because they are going to, or at least try to get like a good buyout, because they're getting rid of everybody and they're selling all the real estate. And there it goes. They might sell your laptop if they can get $100 for it. Dave, last word to you on this.
No, just that I think that the reason why the Athletics even had an audience is because not because they were snatching great sports writers away from papers, but because these papers were bleeding them out anyway. Like for so many sports writers that I know, the Athletic was like a trampoline as they were taking the fall, and they've bounced off that trampoline and put out the kind of journalism that I think the sports world desperately needs. So, we cross our fingers and hope for the future of this, because it really is about the future of real sports writing, not ex-jocks on television. All power to ex-jocks. I love my ex-jocks, but I'm talking like we're like journalists doing the work of chasing stories, of trying to figure out whether Novak Djokovic forged that test or did that event with kids while he already knew that he had COVID. Or, I mean, these are things that need to be ferreted out, and the Athletic shows a model for being able to have that. And so we all have a vested interest in seeing it succeed.
Yeah, I mean, the more outlets, the better, and the more independent outlets, the better. Because again, the difference between New York Times and the Athletic and ESPN is that New York Times and the Athletics are not partners with the leagues that they cover. So if someone at the Athletic wants to do a league of denial type investigation, the NFL is not going to tell them they can't. In the same way that the NFL got really mad at ESPN for doing that, and ESPN and PBS had to break up, remember, on that Frontline series for reasons like that. And you don't have those conflicts at the New York Times or at the Athletic. And like that is, day-to-day fans don't always recognize how important that is, but that is vitally important, that like everything you say and write about the NFL, whoever does not have to pass through the NFL's filter for them to say, yeah, you know what, this is fine. Okay, guys, quick pivot because time is running out, and it is time for, you guys know this is my favorite part of the week, but this is my favorite part of the week, in or out. We're going to tee up the topics. Y'all are going to tell me if you are in or out. Topic one, the NFL just finished their first 17-game regular season. We saw a bunch of records, like single season records, naturally, because there are more games in which to set these records. But week 18 felt like week 50. Dave Zirin, I'll go to you first since you're in front of me. Are you in or out on a 17-week NFL regular season?
how much more out can I be? I thought it sucked so badly. And this is the first time I've ever used the word sucked on this show. It's a very immature word, but I'm using it because, one, I'm quoting my son, and two, because to me, this reaches back into my childhood, because there's something very iconic about the 9-7 record, the 8-8
Yes.
record, 7-9, 14-2, 15-1. Like, if you just say those number combos to me, I will think of teams in years like that and be like, whoa, yeah, that was something when the Jets went 7-9 every single year, or that was something when the Bears went 15-1, and then they went 14-2 the next season, but lost in the playoffs. These numbers are just so iconic. And to go 17, it's seriously is like drawing a clown nose on the Mona Lisa, an absolute unforced error that takes the history of the sport and treats it like toilet paper. I'm very frustrated with it. I thought the games were awful, with the exception of the last game of the night against the Chargers, with the Chargers against the Raiders. But, the NFL, that's how they get you. They put forward an entire buffet of slop on this last week. You get that one incredible dish, and before you know it, we're back again the next week. That's the evil genius of how this sport is structured.
Megan McPeak, you in or out?
I'm out. This was a butt fumble.
Yes. Perfect.
I'm out, not because I think it was a butt fumble, because the NFL knows what they're doing, right? More games equals more revenue. And I'm just surprised that the union went for this. And Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, was there, with the addition of the 17th game, was there did the salary cap rise in accordance with the 50 with the addition of the 17th game?
Yeah, more money for players and fewer preseason games.
Right. But like, they're going to get to the point where they want to keep adding games. And there was this point where, like this season, between the extra week in the season and all these COVID cancellations, where there are NFL games, or not cancellation, but postponements, there are NFL games on TV for like 8 out of 9 straight days, which is a big departure from the sport that used to just own Sunday, and then like it was a big deal when they moved to Monday as well. But the thing that has made the NFL special, the thing that makes football different from other sports, is the scarcity, right? Like, what does Sunday Night Football's theme song say? Waiting all day for Sunday night, waiting all week for Sunday night. And the NFL feels to me, Megan, you'll know where I'm going with this. It feels like Darcy and Stacey on TLC. And I'm watching 90 Day Fiance, and the commercial says Darcy and Stacey are back. And I say, well, how can they be back when they never went away? And this is the NFL. We already got the NFL Network. USFL is coming back this spring for some reason. The Rock wants his XFL. Guys, I want a chance to miss football. And if you keep adding to the regular season, fans don't get a chance to miss football. And most importantly, you are going to run out of players. And what you don't want, like, we already had Adrian Peterson playing this season. He is 45 years old. I think Adrian Peterson and I might have been in college at the same time. You don't want dudes my age playing football because you can't fill your rosters. But this is where we're headed. And guess what? I wouldn't last 3 minutes in NFL practice, but this is what you're going to ask for, because you want to keep expanding the season, because they got 17. They're going to go to 18 eventually. To real football, Toronto FC has broken the bank to sign, and guys, forgive me if I'm slaughtering this guy's name, Lorenzo Insigne. Did I say it right, Dave?
Yeah, it sounded good.
From Italy. Okay. $15 million a year, 5 years, $15 million per season, with an option for a 6th. Dave Zyron, you in or out on Toronto FC of Major League Soccer paying big league money to Lorenzo Insigne?
Oh, I'm all the way in. The Toronto footy culture is something that is very under-discussed and underrated. And it seems appropriate to me that the professional ranks would mirror the incredible youth sports system that it does exist in Toronto, and the development of players that we are seeing really for in this generation, I think, in an unprecedented way. I'm talking about men's and women's soccer in this regard. So when you have that fertile grounds, you make the investment. So I'm all in on that.
Perfect. Megan McPeak, you in or out?
I mean, the only way you're going to get better is if you play the best players. So I'm in. If it makes them better, then hey, throw it down.
Throw it down.
Now, as for me, look, I'm still not convinced that MLS hasn't borrowed elements of its business structure from our friend Mr. Ponzi, right? Because it's like it's a single entity league. You don't own the teams, you own the right. Like each MLSE, each ownership group owns the right to operate the local franchise, and the whole thing becomes more valuable when more people buy in, and the expansion fee is always rising. So whatever, I can't remember what it cost Toronto FC to buy in back in 2005, 2006, in the run up to TFC, but it's a lot more now. But the byproduct of that is there's a lot more money lying around to pay guys like Mr. Insigne. And from a sports standpoint, here's the significant part of it is that, when I covered TFC back in 2007, and even back when Toronto FC signed Jermaine Defoe, like these types of signings for the most part were for old guys who just wanted a highly paid victory lap. That's what David Beckham had. That's sort of what Jermaine Defoe had. And the difference with Insigne is that he is a really good player who is still young enough to make an impact. Like he's here to play. He's not here just to get the money and just to be famous. And so if if Toronto FC loses money on him, like if they don't get that money back directly in ticket sales, merchandise sales, in like the big bump that comes with winning a championship, so be it. Like, you guys have the money. Clearly you do, because you gave it to him. So I'm like, if a big corporation winds up losing some money on this, guys, this is the game you're playing. I'm not going to feel bad for you. I always like it when players get paid. There you go. And it gives fans, and again, like MLS fans, like, and MLS itself has said, we want to be like a major league. Our name is Major League Soccer, not minor league soccer. We can't just always be the place for guys that are too young, for guys on their way up and guys on their way out. Like, we have to at some point be the place where people want to spend quality years of their careers. So are they going to lose money on it? Maybe. Am I in on it? Sure. I like it. I love it. All right, last one. Because Megan brought this up at the beginning of the episode. We record Monday mornings. Monday night is the college football national championship game between Georgia and Alabama, two scrappy underdogs, two overlooked Cinderellas. Okay,
this might be the most grinded out, low scoring game we've seen in a long time in college football.
All right,
these teams like to play defense.
But this is the first college national championship in the name, image, and likeness era. So players can now go sign sponsorship deals. Bryce Young from Alabama is reportedly making upwards of $1 million a year just in terms of sponsorships. Brampton's John Mechie, who plays for Alabama, he's injured right now. He's a wide receiver, but he has deals with like vegan sports supplement companies, because apparently John Mechie doesn't eat. So they can do this now. But the coaches are concerned. Here's Kirby Smart. You're going to have haves and have-nots, and the separation that is already there is going to grow even larger. The schools, this is Kirby Smart talking to ESPN, the schools that have the capacity and the ability are more competitive in the name, image, and likeness market are going to be the schools that step ahead on top of other schools. So I don't want recruiting decisions to be made on that. But ultimately, a lot of young men will want to make their decision based on that. Megan McPeak, are you in or out on the idea that unregulated access to sponsorship deals is going to be the factor that ushers in an era of competitive imbalance in college football?
I actually think that it is definitely going to have an effect across the board when you think of college football and college basketball. I think you look at schools you could look at schools in any conference. And if you're not one of the big name schools in a good area, you could lose out on some really talented recruits because they go to another school who has better sponsorship opportunities. And I don't know if this is necessarily going to be the downfall, but I definitely think this is going to play a role in a lot of the, mid-major schools who might've got a player because they wanted to stay close to home. losing out on some of this talent because of the name, image, and likeness. So it's definitely going to be something that I think is going to be kind of tweaked and might have to be in some way, shape, or form looked at. But I am in that this is going to have some definite cause and effect on recruiting going forward.
I'm out on what Kirby Smart and Nick Saban are saying, only because the competitive balance has not existed in a long time. Like, college football is now like international rugby. Look at international rugby. New Zealand isn't number one all year, every year, but New Zealand is never below the top 3. And the rest of the top 4 are always some combination of England, France, South Africa, Australia. And that's it. And then there's another tier after that. And then there's another tier after that. And this is what college sports has become. You look at who's in the national championship every year, some combination of Georgia, Alabama, sometimes Clemson, sometimes Ohio State, sometimes Oklahoma. And that's who we've had for the last few years. And so, like, that's not going to change. Like, and Alabama is the constant. And so this idea that allowing people to get sponsorship deals is going to create competitive imbalance. There already is competitive imbalance. And schools that are willing to spend the most money consistently on football are the ones that do this. And they're the ones that benefit most markedly on the recruiting market. And so the schools themselves cannot spend money on players. But when you look at locker rooms where every single locker has an LED screen, LED touch screen, where you can, sign in, see what your classes are, see how much protein they want you to take, all this stuff. Like, this is what happens in these locker rooms. So the idea, and Alabama can afford that, Georgia can afford that, Clemson can afford that, Appalachian State can't afford that. So let's not pretend that like name, image, and likeness is a thing that gives Alabama an advantage over these smaller schools. And what smaller schools can do in this era is like Deion Sanders is doing at Jackson State. Hey, well, you might want to go to this big school. You can come here and be a much bigger fish in a smaller pond. And look, we got all these third-party people who want to pay you money to endorse their products. And you stand out a lot more here than you would at USC. Why don't you? So like this NIL era actually can also give like a lot of smaller schools a chance to compete with bigger schools, because it's not always dependent on how nice of a gold-plated locker room the school can provide. Dave Zirin, you in or out?
Oh, I mean, I'm reminded so much of the teams that said we don't want free agency in Major League Baseball in the 1960s. They tended to be teams like the New York Yankees, and their arguments tended to be the same, that it would upset competitive balance. Now, at the time, the competitive balance was the Yankees make it to the playoffs every single year and win every third World Series. So they want, I mean, that's what Nick Saban and Kirby Smart want, is they want the current competitive balance set up, because there is no competitive balance. The only competitive balance is them getting 10-figure contracts and, doing their thing. So I am of the belief that we are going to see a tremendous flattening of the landscape with name, image, and likeness. Mm-hmm. You're going to be able to see schools. It's not just about the Jackson States and the Alabamas, the little guys and the big guys. There have been sleeping giants in college football for years, like Tennessee, for example, that haven't been able to get out of their own way. That maybe this is a time where they will able to actually recruit some of the players that they've been losing to the Alabamas and the Georgias. Because of name, image, and likeness. A place like the California schools are going to benefit profoundly from name, image, and likeness, and they haven't made much of a peep in recent years. I mean, so I think that there's a lot there, that not only on the basic social justice tip, that this is just the right thing to do, it's also going to make college football better, to the chagrin of the Kirby Smarts and Nick Sabans of the world.
It's been another fun week. Dave, in between now and next week, the people are going to start missing you. Tell the folks where they can find you.
Yeah, hit me up on the Twitter box at Edge of Sports. If you have strong opinions about Aaron Rodgers, just please tell somebody else.
Megan McPeak, between now and next week, where can the people find you?
As always, on the Twitterverse at Megan McPeak, spelled with an H, because it is the right way to do it.
Perfect. And as for me, I'm at Morgan P. Campbell on Twitter and Instagram. Too old for TikTok. Don't have Facebook anymore. Too cool for Triller. Yeah, so like, subscribe, leave a comment on this. Talk to us on social media using the Bring It In hashtag. Leave us your suggestions for in or out topics. Why are all these things important, Megan?
Because the algorithm is hungry, Morgan, and we must feed
Famished. Feed the algorithm. Feed the algorithm. Feed the algorithm like a team chef feeding a bunch of offensive linemen. Like it's the job that never stops going. So listen, it's been fun as usual. Dave Zirin, which movie starring Sidney Poitier describes what we're gonna do next week?
Well, I mean, I think next week is going to be, in the heat of the night. No, I don't.
I mean, I was just thinking about the sequel to Up, Down, Saturday Night.
Let's do it again. Let's do it again. I knew that. I was trying to get a little cute though, but I was like, I want to think of a cuter Sidney Poitier film to say than Let's Do It Again. But the titles failed me. I wasn't going to do Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
That too. All right, guys. For Dave and for Megan, this has been Morgan Campbell. This has been Bring It In with Morgan Campbell. Next week, let's do it again.